Good day to you. How many hours have you been working so far today for free? Yeah, how long have you been working today for free? Yeah, how many times have you been typing on your phone, your laptop, anything having to do with an electronic screen using keyboards? How many times have you done that today? Did you know that you were working for free? Yeah, you are, because every time you're on the internet, which includes, by the way, not just when you're tapping buttons, but also just carrying a phone around in your pocket and you're online all the time and you're showing your location, anytime you're on the internet, you are providing what is known as big data for free. You are supplying Google and Facebook, also known as the world's biggest advertising agencies, with information that they are then selling to companies so that those companies will be willing to advertise on your newsfeed or whatever your social media content delivery system is. And that's what's going on with the internet. You're working for free. Google, Facebook, they don't produce anything. You, the user, you're the one who's producing stuff that's making them money, to the tune of $160 billion for Google last year and $80 billion for Facebook. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? And it's actually going to launch our next section of the class and also our next chapter, which is all about online and mobile media. And we're taking on new kinds of media today. We are now leaving behind legacy media, which is to say television, radio, newspapers, film, everything that we've studied so far. Now we're moving into this world that we're living in that is part of our living history in mass media. Radio, TV, that was part of somebody else's living history, but you're living right now in a living history of online and mobile media, and you're being tracked every moment of your life. Don't mistake it. Everywhere you go, your IP address is being supplied by your phone. And so it's a brand new world that we're headed into. The internet, which is the source of online media, is still the newest mass medium when we compare it to other media, and it's still evolving, and we're still studying it. And social media are a big part of the mix of the internet and what goes on the internet. All those social media platforms, and we're including, by the way, YouTube as well. It's a social media platform. We're looking at that in this class today. In fact, we're looking at the relationship between social media and traditional media, or legacy media, the radio, film, TV side of things. And we're going to try and decide where we stand. But first, let's trace some of the technological history of the internet, and we're going to start with 1964. So we're really in the modern history, right? 1964, there was an engineer who was working for the government. His name was Paul Baran, Baran. And he had this idea that if he could cut messages into little bits and pieces and send them electronically, and those bits and pieces would go through whatever the easiest path was, that this would then be a form of communication that could be used in the event of a nuclear war. Can you believe that? If a nuclear bomb landed in the United States, the idea of Paul Baran was to have a communication network where it wouldn't be disrupted because the messages would be in bits and pieces. And so he basically came up with the premise that allows computers to communicate using bits and pieces. And these bits and pieces are called packet switching. Packet switching, it's where messages are cut into bits and pieces and they are sent along the easiest route. If you send your ones and zeros, which is what messages are made up of on the internet, they're digital messages, right? If you send your ones and zeros to Philadelphia and they're supposed to be going on to Los Angeles because that's the email that you're sending to a friend in Los Angeles, but it goes through Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is down because of an electrical outage, then those same words will go through Baltimore or they'll go through Pittsburgh. And that's what packet switching is all about. Now, actually, packet switching was not a name given to this by Paul Baran, because there was another researcher, just like we've talked about in other classes so far, who was also working on this technology. His name was Donald Davis. He was in England. He was working on the same idea, and it was actually his phrasing, packet switching, that resulted in this method of communication. So let's talk about that military agency that got the internet started. Did you know that? It was basically the military that got computer communication going, as it used to be called. They built the first network for packet switching, and they did that at academic institutions, which is to say universities. Their project was called the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, and so they named their first computer network ARPANET. And they used universities because they didn't quite know what they had at the Army base and they didn't want to breach security. So they decided to move this operation to mostly universities on the West Coast in California, Stanford University, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, if you know this, and the University of Utah was included in this as well. So they got computers talking to each other for the first time using packet switching. And also, because of this, other networks started to copy that and grow up on their own, right? Networks and regional networks of computer switching. So, but the problem is we have, just like we have different countries, we have different languages growing up. In Spain, you speak Spanish. In France, you speak French, but they're right next door to each other. How do you communicate with each other? The same thing was happening with networks. All these networks had different languages, different protocols, if you will. And so finally, a protocol was developed that would allow all computers to talk to each other. You're going to recognize it. It's called the TCP protocol, TCP/IP protocol. Have you heard that before? TCP IP? So TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol, and the IP stands for Internet Protocol. And we're getting pretty technical here now, but you've heard these phrases, I'm sure, before. And then this allowed the industry to develop with a standardization, right? One computer network based on the West Coast could speak with a computer network on the East Coast because of this new protocol, this TCP protocol. One of the very first commercial companies to rise up out of this and to start to offer communication over computers as a commercial service was Quantum, based in San Diego, and then Quantum later became America Online, or AOL, which is still existing today as an instant message system. Now let's move over to talking about email. I was right there on the front lines when email was first coming out. I was a grad student at Penn State University, and we were looking at black screens with white letters. That's what the internet looked like. There was no internet. It was email. It was being able to send an electronic message. And I had a professor, and I went to his class, and he handed out a syllabus that said no hard copies will be accepted, only electronic mail. And this was so new at the time. What's that? So I went to the computer lab at Penn State and I logged into an account. What's this? And I started to see words on the screen and I hit that send button and a message went to my professor and he wrote back and he said, "Congratulations." And that was the most thrilling thing in the world to have sent one of the very first emails. And so email, and that was in the 1980s. So email has opened up a side of the internet that we want to talk about now, and one of the areas that it opened up is interpersonal communication between two people. It expanded the ability of people to have relationships beyond just being in the same space and the same place, the same space at the same time to have a friendship, go walking down the street with a friend. Now you can do it on email. So in the early years, the internet was driven by email. And we want to highlight an inventor now. His name was Ray Tomlinson, Tomlinson, Tomlinson. He just died within the last couple of years. In 1972, Ray Tomlinson wrote the program, the software to allow email to be sent from one computer to another. And it's him who's responsible for that @ sign, the @esu.edu or @live.esu.edu or @iCloud. That's all him. That's the address protocol, if you want to look at it for internet email. And email was very interesting when it first came out because initially it was asynchronous, right? Meaning you could send a message and it would sit in somebody's box and they will respond when they want to, just like writing a letter and sending it through the post office. But then comes instant messaging, which raises internet communication to a new level because now you can communicate with people in real time. You can talk to somebody in another country and they're messaging you and it's real time. This is very exciting, instant messaging. Please note, however, that instant messaging as a software, built on a software program, is not the instant messaging programs that are used by various companies, I'm trying to say, don't use the same protocol like TCP. And that's why chats cannot go across AOL to Facebook, and why Facebook can't go across to other chatting services, because they're unique to the platforms that they're appearing on. So let's talk about the World Wide Web now, the WWW as it first was known. There was a researcher, again, we're talking about Stanford University in California here, Doug Engelhardt was his name. And he was the first person to invent the mouse. And you can take a look at the mouse, the original mouse. It looks like nothing that our mouse looks like today. In the links that I've sent you to class today, you can take a look at the very, very first primitive mouse invented by Doug Engelhardt. And that allowed for more interactivity with this screen that we're looking at. And so until 1990, basically, using the internet for anything more than email was a challenge because you just had this keyboard until the mouse came out. And that started to propel different ways of interacting with this technology. And then along comes a researcher named Ted Nelson. Ted Nelson, he invents hypertext. Hypertext, which is basically a link that will lead to another document. So it adds like a third dimension. It's like you're reading a Microsoft Word document, you're reading about the Constitution of the United States, and you see First Amendment. You can click on First Amendment and go to a whole new document, right? That's what you can do in Wikipedia. That's what you can do anywhere on the web. And that's what Ted Nelson gave us, the hypertext. It added a third dimension to the computer. And then along comes a person, finally, who is credited for, quote, inventing the internet. Inventing the internet. He's an English researcher. His name was Tim Berners-Lee. He has a hyphenated name, Berners-Lee. And he had this book from the Victorian era in England. I don't know if you know the Victorian era was the longest reign of a queen. I don't know if Queen Elizabeth will pass up Queen Victoria, but she was living for a long time. Also when England was exploring the world and going around the world. So there was this book that came out in the Victorian era called Inquire Within About Everything. Inquire within about everything. Like you could get everything you need to know right within whatever it is that you're looking at. And that inspired Tim Berners-Lee to think about what if we had this thing that was existing on our computers that was really connecting other computers to the rest of the world, and we can get all of the information about everything anytime we want it. That's where he came up with. So he wrote a software program for his computer actually called Enquire. Enquire. And it was all about organizing documents on his computer. And then he developed the software for the internet to work as a mass medium using the phrasing World Wide Web. And this software that he developed had three components to it, and you will recognize these. First of all, you have a URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and that's basically the address of the content that you see on your computer or your phone. You also have, as part of Tim Berners-Lee software design for the internet, you have HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's the protocol for sending and receiving content. That's what we talked about earlier, TCP. And then lastly, you have HTML. HTML is Hypertext Markup Language, and that's programming language to create web pages. There are other languages to create web pages, but to create web pages using graphics and motion and words and sound and all of that. Tim Berners-Lee had a vision for the web. He wanted it to be decentralized. He wanted it to have no central authority, and he wanted it to be free. He wanted it to exist all over the world, and nobody could control it, and nobody could monopolize it. I wonder how he would feel about Facebook and Google today. And in fact, the web is still defined as having openness and accessibility by most people today. It's one of the reasons that newspapers are having a problem is they can't get people to pay for them on the internet because people expect information to be for free. Now let's talk about search engines. Search engines, the very first search engine, I remember going around ESU's computer labs, it had a globe, a blue globe. And whenever it was searching for something, that globe would spin and spin and spin. And let me tell you, it was slow. I would see students like this at their computers waiting for this most simple document to load. The name of this original search engine was called Mosaic. It was called a graphical browser. Let's call it a graphical browser. They become intertwined, search engine and graphical browser. Originally, they were called graphical browsers to browse like you're browsing in a store, but to browse for graphics. And so the very first one was Mosaic, and then that was later followed by a quicker browser that was all over ESU's computer labs, and that was Netscape. Netscape. Of course, today it's all about Google, Safari, Bing. Those are the ones that are used the most. Mobile apps is yet another development in online and mobile media going mobile. Mobile apps are a big part of how we go online. We look at our apps all the time on our phones and on our laptops, and apps are also on our televisions now, and we do streaming. 21% of people are constantly online, according to the book, and I think that is an understatement. I think that's vastly underestimating how many people are online if you look at people as being online when they have their phones in their pockets. Let's talk about blogs and podcasts and streaming now all in the same category. These are all ways of going mobile because you can do all of them from your phone. And so we'll take on the word blog first. It actually comes from the term web log. You know, like a log, you're logging in on like a diary. That's where it comes from. Blog, that's where it comes from. It's a throwback to magazines in a way. And this is because Berners-Lee, he wanted people not only to be able to find documents on the internet, but also to create those documents. And so a blog became a very important part. And YouTube has opened up the possibilities of blogging, and Facebook Live and podcast sites. They've opened up not just blogging, but also streaming, Facebook Live. And YouTube offers streaming and all of these things, podcasts as well. They're all allowing individual people, average people, people who don't have wealth, they can become famous, like Justin Bieber, right? He was a YouTuber before he became huge. He was just an average, regular, wasn't average, but he was a person who didn't have an agent. Or his YouTube, that's what opened it up. And you can have the same thing happen to you. Dominique Ruiz, you know about her? I'm watching her guitar playing on Facebook. She's like many of you know in this class, she's just a YouTube influencer. She happens to play guitar, Dominique Ruiz in California, and she wears fashion, plays a lot of classic rock, and she's making a living by doing that. Also, the idea of blogs, podcasts, and streaming on the internet allows for the release of independent films. I mean, at least technically. We've already discussed in this class how filmmaking has been dominated for the most part by big studios. And so what about independent filmmakers? I mean, I'm sure there's somebody in this class who would like to make a film someday. And so this has all been opened up by blogs, podcasts, and streaming, as has the last area that we're going to talk about, and that is citizen journalism. Citizen journalism. There is no way that Derek Chauvin would be in jail right now if it wasn't for a bystander who caught a video of the black male who had a knee put on his neck and was killed and became a martyr for the entire nation for a long period of time. We're still going through that. But why is that? It's because a person with a cell phone was able to capture that video and then get it out to media. And you have that going on all the time. Citizens capturing news events and then getting them into the mainstream media. It's called citizen journalism. It's all possible because of blogs and podcasts and streaming. Now let's turn to the so-called hacker ethic, which is an ethic that exists in the online and mobile media world. Most people think of hacking as a bad thing. I can tell you one of the big disaster stories at ESU is when WESS Radio, our campus radio station, which I advise, wanted to first stream. We had an ESU technician who recommended that we use a Linux system. That's an open software system, unlike DOS or unlike Apple's proprietary system, iOS. Linux. And so we put a computer in the radio station and started streaming our signal. And inside of one day, the Chinese had hacked into our computer and brought down ESU's entire computer system during registration week. What a disaster that was. Okay, so most people think of hacking as a really bad thing. They think it is sabotage, right? But actually, hacking as an ethic is something that is looked forward to by computer programmers. And there is a hacker ethic that's summed up in an author, Stephen Levy's book about hackers. He says it's about people who like programming computers and using them to their fullest potential. And so they're always trying to break them down. Steve Jobs, when he had Apple, he had whole teams. That's all their job was to try and hack into Apple's software. So what do we have now that this internet and online media and social media and the World Wide Web and all these terms that we've used, email, what have they created for us? They've created a new area of living. And that new area of living is called cyberspace, right? And it comes from cybernetics. And that is the Greek word for pilot. And so we're piling into a new world. That's what it really is. And this cyberspace has completely redefined community and the whole concept of friends. I mean, a friend was somebody you had to meet in the past in person. You had to go through some struggles, some challenges so that it tested your friendship. And over time, a friendship endures. Today, I've got so-called friends on Facebook I've never met in person, and you have the same for all of your social media platforms. So community has been completely redefined, as has friends, by the online world. Now let's talk about conflicts over digital media, and specifically we want to talk first about inappropriate material for children. In this class, I've already mentioned how Instagram is under the spotlight right now for encouraging females, for the most part, to seek attention and admiration from people they don't know. It's a basic premise of Instagram. But in general, we have whole ranges of material that are out there for children to see. Pornography is probably the one that's talked about the most. Pornography is readily accessible and is for free, and you can come across it very accidentally by just typing words that you think are so-called innocent. I mean, for a long time, a pornography company owned the search phrase White House. So anytime you type White House, porn came up. And so that's an area of exposure that people are really worried about for children. Same with drugs, same with bomb making, same with just adult scenes. There's a lot of conflicts over digital media and the internet making everything available for free and being decentralized so that nobody controls it. And that brings up another area that's a conflict, and that's privacy and the media. It's just amazing to me what people put online about their social lives, including their breakups, including their depression, including what they love, including every detail of their Christmases, their New Year's, their families. People do photo dumps on Facebook, like 74 photos. And it's so self-indulgent to me anyhow, but what it's also doing is it's throwing away your privacy. It's saying that you are available to be known, your whereabouts at any single time. And that's an area that's an issue for digital media when it comes to areas like revenge porn, for example, when it comes to areas like posting a photo of you and somebody else, and you're on vacation, and the somebody else you're with doesn't want their work to know that you're on vacation, but you posted it anyhow. You violated their privacy. Lots of issues having to do with the internet. Yet another conflict area is convergence. So convergence is all about all the media delivery systems that are out there and all the content that's out there. They're all converging into one source for distributing it, and that is your phone increasingly, also your computer. So you're watching movies on your phone, you're taking your classes on your phone, you're doing your banking on your phone, you're talking to people on your phone, you're doing the same on your laptop. Everything is converging, and yet you still can't watch movies for free on your phone. You still have to pay for those movies. You still sometimes can't even look at movies because there are buffering problems. So convergence is not everything it is all made up to be. And so now we're going to wrap up by saying a theme that we started class out with, and that is that virtually everything you do on the internet is data. It's big data. It's sending that big data to big money makers, not just Google and YouTube that I mentioned earlier, but also the Amazons of the world. And so data collection is going on all the time. It's this brand new world. It's this world of online and mobile media that initially started as a way of sending messages to avoid a military strike, and now it's become a way for people to work for free. Hope you have a great day working for free.